The internet didn't just flinch, it recoiled when 50 Cent allegedly cracked open a vault nobody was supposed to touch. One post, one insinuation, and suddenly whispers turned into sirens claiming Netflix refused to air footage involving Diddy's mother. Yes, that mother. The woman who was never supposed to be part of the headline, never supposed to be dragged into the spotlight, and definitely never supposed to be mentioned by 50 Cent with this kind of energy. This wasn't just messy, this was radioactive. Because when Netflix says no, it's never casual. They don't blink at controversy, they monetize it. So if something was allegedly too risky, too explosive, too uncomfortable to stream, the question becomes terrifyingly simple. What was in that footage? And why would 50 Cent, a man who treats industry beef like a lifelong hobby, even hint that it exists? The moment this story leaked, timelines erupted. Comment sections turned into conspiracy boards. People stopped asking if something was hidden and started asking who it was protecting. This made the Kardashians look like a controlled PR exercise. Because this wasn't reality TV chaos. This was legacy-level damage control territory. The moment 50 Cent even hinted that Netflix refused to air footage involving Diddy's mother, the internet snapped to attention like someone yelled fire in a crowded theater. Because this wasn't just another petty jab in a long-running rap beef. This wasn't a meme, a troll, or a throwaway caption meant to trend for 12 minutes and disappear. This felt heavier, more deliberate, like someone casually lifting the corner of a curtain and letting just enough light through to make people panic about what was hiding behind it. Let's get one thing straight. Netflix does not scare easily. This is a platform that built billion-dollar success on scandals, documentaries that ruin reputations, and content that makes PR teams sweat through expensive suits. So when the claims surfaced that Netflix allegedly refused to air certain footage, the conversation immediately shifted. People stopped asking whether the story was messy and started asking whether it was dangerous. Because refusal implies risk, and risk implies consequences. 50 Cent knows exactly how this industry works. He's not new to it. He's survived it, thrived in it, weaponized it. When he speaks, especially about rivals, he doesn't just throw punches. He places landmines and waits. His reputation is built on patience and pressure. So when he alluded to footage involving Diddy's mother being too much for Netflix, it didn't sound accidental. It sounded like a warning disguised as shade. The first reaction wasn't outrage. It was confusion. Why bring a mother into it? In hip-hop culture, family is usually treated as off-limits, at least publicly. That's the unwritten rule everyone pretends to respect until they don't. And when that line gets crossed, it signals escalation. Not noise, escalation. The kind that tells you the gloves aren't just off, they were never worn to begin with. Almost immediately, people began dissecting the wording. Refused to air. Not delayed. Not edited. Refused. That single word lit up conspiracy boards like Christmas morning. Refusal suggests Netflix saw something and decided the fallout wasn't worth the clicks. And for a company that profits off fallout, that's not a small decision. That's a calculation. The speculation spiraled fast. Some assumed it was legal risk. Others assumed reputational damage. A few went full conspiracy mode, claiming this was about protecting legacies rather than truth. None of it was confirmed. But that didn't matter. The idea alone was enough to poison the well. Because once people believed something was hidden, they stopped trusting everything else they're shown. What made this moment especially volatile was 50 Cent's tone. He didn't sound shocked. He didn't sound offended. He sounded amused. That's what unsettled people. Because amusement implies confidence. Confidence implies leverage. And leverage in an industry built on silence is terrifying. He spoke like someone who already knew how this would land and enjoyed watching the reaction unfold in real time. Diddy's name trending alongside his mother's was not something anyone expected. Mothers are supposed to be shields in public narratives, not targets. So the fact that her name was suddenly part of the discourse raised immediate red flags. People weren't just questioning the footage, they were questioning boundaries. Why would 50 even go there unless he believed the ground was already unstable? The internet did what it always does next. It dug. Old interviews resurfaced. Past documentaries were rewatched with new suspicion. people started questioning what had been shown before and what might have been left out. The idea that Netflix might have drawn a line made viewers wonder how many other lines existed that they never noticed. And that's how distress spreads. Quietly, efficiently, and permanently. Meanwhile, Netflix stayed silent. No clarification, no denial, no corporate statement explaining what was or wasn't refused. And that silence became its own storyline. Silence in moments like this isn't neutral. It's interpreted as strategy, legal caution, or confirmation depending on who's watching. The longer the platform said nothing, the more people assumed there was something worth not talking about. Diddy's camp also didn't rush to address it, and that lack of response created a vacuum that speculation rushed to fill. Fans argued about whether responding would legitimize the claim or ignoring it would let it die. But the internet doesn't let things die quietly anymore. It archives them, screenshots them, and waits for the right moment to resurrect them louder. What made the claim stick wasn't evidence. It was plausibility. 50 Cent has a history of saying things that sound outrageous until time reveals they weren't completely baseless. That reputation worked in his favor here. People may not believe everything he says, but they believe he knows things. And that belief alone is enough to destabilize narratives. As the story spread, it stopped being about a single piece of footage. It became about power, about who controls stories in an industry where visibility equals survival. Netflix refusing to air something suggested that even the biggest platforms have limits. And once audiences realize there are limits, they start wondering what's being protected and why. The pop culture comparisons came quickly. People said this made scripted dramas look tame. Others joked that this was the kind of scandal that never makes it into documentaries because the real story lives in the edits. The humor masked anxiety, because deep down, people understood that if this allegation held even a grain of truth, it wasn't just messy. It was structural. 50 Cent didn't clarify. He didn't expand. He didn't release anything. He let the idea breathe. That's a veteran move. You don't over-explain a grenade. You pull the pin and let everyone else decide where to run. And the industry ran straight into speculation, paranoia, and quiet phone calls behind closed doors. This wasn't a reveal. It was an insinuation with teeth. And by the time people realized how far it had traveled, it was already too late to pull it back. The story had legs, and more importantly, it had curiosity. Because once people believe there's footage they weren't allowed to see, they stop trusting what they are allowed to see. And that's where real damage begins. Once the idea of unaired footage lodged itself into the public imagination, the internet did what it does best: it escalated without permission. This wasn't a slow burn. This was gasoline on a spark. Timelines stopped scrolling casually and started scrolling urgently. Comment sections mutated into conspiracy boards. And suddenly, everyone wasn't just asking what Netflix refused to air, they were asking who made that decision, who felt threatened by it, and how deep the rabbit hole actually went. Memes arrived first, because memes are how chaos introduces itself. People joke that Netflix only refuses content when lawyers start hyperventilating. Others compare the situation to a documentary cutting its most explosive episode because it tested poorly with billionaires. The jokes were funny, but they weren't harmless. They carried suspicion. Every laugh had a side eye attached to it. Then came the reaction channels, and they smelled blood. Creators broke down 50 Cent's wording frame by frame, like it was a Zapruder film of hip-hop drama. They debated whether refused meant permanently banned or temporarily shelved. They argued about whether this was a creative disagreement or an emergency brake pulled at the executive level. The more they talked, the more the story grew. Legs, celebrity reactions didn't arrive as statements. They arrived as signals, likes on shady posts. Cryptic captions dropped at suspiciously perfect times. Old beefs suddenly felt relevant again. When influential figures start interacting indirectly, the internet treats it like Morse code. Every emoji becomes a message. Every repost becomes confirmation in the court of public opinion. Netflix's silence grew louder by the hour. No corporate clarification. No anonymous sources stepping in to calm the waters. And in the absence of official language, imagination filled the space aggressively. People assumed the worst because the worst felt plausible. The platform that never hesitates to monetize controversy suddenly looked cautious. That contradiction fueled outrage. Diddy's name trending next to his mother's added another layer of discomfort. Fans weren't used to seeing family members dragged into industry warfare at this level. Mothers are supposed to humanize celebrities, not become the center of allegations. The shock factor alone kept the story circulating. People didn't know what to think, but they knew they couldn't look away. Pop culture comparisons exploded. Some said this felt like the deleted chapter of a documentary nobody was allowed to read. Others compared it to a season finale cliffhanger, where the biggest reveal never airs because the network panicked. The analogies weren't just jokes, they framed Netflix as a gatekeeper, not just a distributor. The outrage wasn't uniform. Some defended Netflix, arguing that responsible platforms have limits and legal boundaries. Others accused the company of protecting powerful figures and burying uncomfortable truths. That split created a culture war inside the comments. Every side believed they were exposing hypocrisy. Every argument added fuel. What really sent things into overdrive was 50 Cent's refusal to elaborate. He didn't walk it back. He didn't clarify. He didn't deny. He let the internet do the heavy lifting, which is exactly what seasoned instigators do when they know speculation will travel farther than facts. Silence, in this case, felt intentional, like he was daring someone else to speak first. The memes got darker. People joked about lost footage being locked in a vault labeled too real for streaming. Others mocked the idea of editorial standards suddenly appearing when certain names were involved. Humor became a weapon, and it was being swung freely. As days passed, the story shifted from shock to suspicion. Viewers began rewatching old Netflix documentaries with a critical eye, asking what wasn't shown and why. The allegation didn't just affect one project, it poisoned trust in the process. And once trust cracks, it never fully seals again. Industry insiders stayed quiet publicly but were reportedly very loud privately. When stories like this circulate, phones ring behind closed doors. Lawyers review contracts. PR teams draft statements. They hope they won't have to release. Even if nothing ever airs, the ripple effect is real. The fear of exposure alone can change behavior. The internet also started connecting dots that may or may not exist, because that's what it does under uncertainty. Past tensions between 50 Cent and Diddy were dragged back into the spotlight. Old comments were reinterpreted. Every historical interaction was suddenly treated as foreshadowing. The narrative didn't need new information. It was feeding on momentum. By this point, the story wasn't just about footage. It was about censorship, power, and who decides what the public gets to see. People weren't mad just because something was allegedly hidden. They were mad because they believed it was hidden from them. And nothing enrages an audience faster than the feeling of being excluded from the truth. The speculation reached a fever pitch. Was this about legal exposure? Image protection? Family boundaries? Or was it all exaggerated for attention? Nobody knew. But the uncertainty itself became addictive. The lack of answers was the hook. And right when it felt like the chaos might burn itself out, something shifted. The outrage matured. The jokes slowed. The questions became sharper. Because once the internet moves past entertainment and into suspicion, the damage stops being loud and starts being lasting. Whatever that footage was real, exaggerated, or misunderstood, it had already done its job. It destabilized narratives. It challenged trust. And it set the stage for consequences that wouldn't be immediate, but would be unavoidable. When the speculation finally stopped sprinting and started walking, the consequences began to surface in quieter, more permanent ways. This is the phase of scandal nobody screenshots, because it doesn't trend loudly. It settles. It rewires perception. And by now, the conversation wasn't even about what the footage showed. It was about what the refusal to air it suggested. In the attention economy, suggestion is more powerful than evidence because it invites imagination to do the worst possible work. For 50 Cent, this moment didn't damage his image. It reinforced it. He emerged exactly where he's always lived, as the calculated agitator who knows how to destabilize narratives without ever handing over proof. He didn't need to expose anything fully. He just needed to imply that something existed and let the internet carry it the rest of the way. That's leverage. And leverage is more dangerous than receipts because it never expires. It just waits, Diddy's reputation, however, entered a new phase of scrutiny, not because of confirmed wrongdoing, but because family boundaries were suddenly part of the discourse. When mothers get mentioned, the tone changes. Audiences don't see that as entertainment anymore. They see it as a line crossed, which immediately raises questions about how deep a situation goes. Even without answers, the association alone lingers. Every future headline now carries an invisible asterisk, reminding people of what they believe they weren't allowed to see. Netflix didn't walk away clean either. The platform that built its brand on fearless storytelling suddenly looked selective, cautious, even protective. Whether that perception is fair doesn't matter. Once viewers suspect gatekeeping, trust erodes. People start asking which stories are told and which are edited out, which narratives make it to the screen and which quietly disappear in post-production. That doubt doesn't vanish with a press release. It embeds itself into how audiences consume everything afterward. Industry relationships shifted subtly. When stories like this circulate, executives don't panic publicly, they recalibrate privately. Decisions get delayed. Projects get reviewed more carefully. Associations get reconsidered. Nobody announces these shifts, but they happen. Because an industry is built on reputation, even unproven controversy introduces risk, and risk changes behavior. The public conversation matured from outrage to unease. Comment sections stopped screaming and started speculating more carefully. The jokes got quieter. The questions got sharper. People weren't laughing anymore, they were watching, waiting. Because unresolved narratives create tension, and tension keeps attention locked in. What made this fallout especially potent was the lack of closure. No footage surfaced. No denial shut it down. No explanation wrapped it up neatly. The story didn't end, it suspended itself. And suspended stories have gravity. They pull future events toward them. Every time 50 Cent speaks, every time Diddy trends, every time Netflix releases another documentary, this moment hovers in the background like a shadow nobody can quite step out of. Past interactions were suddenly reinterpreted through this new lens. Old comments that once felt playful now sounded calculated. Previous documentaries were rewatched with skepticism, as if viewers were trying to spot the seams where something might have been removed. The internet loves retroactive meaning, and this story gave it permission to rewrite context. The most uncomfortable shift was in how audiences positioned themselves. They stopped seeing themselves as passive viewers and started seeing themselves as excluded observers. The idea that something was withheld from them created resentment. And resentment doesn't need proof. It needs belief. Once people believe information is being filtered for their own good, they stop trusting the filter entirely. For Diddy's mother, the impact was unfair and unavoidable. Being pulled into public speculation without speaking a word strips agency instantly. Silence becomes interpretation. Absence becomes implication. And even though no concrete claims were substantiated, the association alone changed how people talked. That's the cruelty of viral narratives. Proximity becomes participation, whether you consent or not. What makes this kind of fallout so lasting is that it doesn't require repetition to survive. It sits dormant, waiting for relevance. A new documentary, a new feud, a careless caption. Any of it can reactivate the conversation instantly. The story doesn't need new information. It just needs a reminder. This wasn't a cancellation. It wasn't an exposure in the traditional sense. It was something quieter and arguably more dangerous, a destabilization of trust. Trust in platforms. Trust in narratives. Trust in what audiences are told versus what they believe exists beyond the edit. And that's why this moment matters more than it looks. Not because of what was shown, but because of what was withheld. Not because of what was proven, but because of what was implied. In modern media culture, implication is currency. And this implication traveled far. The chaos may have left the trending page, but it didn't disappear. It embedded itself into future conversations, future skepticism, future expectations. The next time Netflix claims transparency, some viewers will remember this. The next time 50 Cent hints at industry secrets, people will listen harder. The next time Diddy's name trends, the association will resurface. This story didn't explode careers. It didn't confirm crimes. It didn't deliver closure. What it did was more subtle and more enduring. It changed the way people look at power, platforms, and the stories they're allowed to consume. If you're still here, you already know this wasn't just another celebrity beef story. This was a reminder that in today's media circus, what doesn't air can be louder than what does. One hint from 50 Cent turned into a full-blown trust crisis, and now everybody's side-eyeing platforms, legacies, and edits like something's missing from the picture. Because when the internet believes a clip was buried, curiosity turns into obsession. Now I want to hear from you, because the comments section is where the real truth hunt begins. Do you think Netflix actually refused to air something explosive? Or is this classic 50 Cent chest planting doubt and letting the internet do the damage for him? Was this about protecting family boundaries, protecting reputations, or protecting something much bigger? And be real, if that footage ever leaked, would you even trust what you're seeing at this point? If this breakdown had you locked in, smash that like button like it's hiding answers you deserve. Hit subscribe if you want unfiltered deep dives into the stories platforms won't explain and celebrities won't clarify. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next moment when a harmless comment turns into a full-blown media earthquake. This is Truth Tattle, where nothing is ever just a rumor, silence is never accidental, and the real story usually lives between the edits. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and stay locked in, because the next secret the internet wasn't supposed to hear is always one post away.